John chapter 11. We've been talking about Lazarus for weeks, and we noticed that the gospel writer told us a story that we didn't have in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Because he needed his audience to see that no matter what happened, even a man being raised from the dead, there's some people who still are not going to believe. We've talked about that for 3 weeks. You getting tired of that? No? Good, because the gospel writer is not going to let that go. But this week he's going to talk about somebody different. So in John chapter 11, it says in verse 55, we have a change of scene. It says, "When it was almost time for Jewish Passover, many went up from the country to Jerusalem for their ceremonial cleansing before the Passover. They kept looking for Jesus, and as they stood in the temple area, they asked one another, 'What do you think? Isn't he coming to the feast at all?' But the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that if anyone found out where Jesus was, he should report it so that they might arrest him." They know he's going to come. They know that this is going to be the big showdown, but they want to know as soon as somebody sees him, we're going to arrest this guy. This got nowhere. He's healing people. He raised a man from the dead. We just got to put a stop to him. Right? Got to put a stop to him. Because we don't want them to take away our place and our temple and our little thing that we have going. No matter what he's doing from God or not. We got to put a stop to it. So, in chapter 12, it says, 6 days before the Passover, Jesus arrived at Bethany. Remember Bethany's 2 miles outside of Jerusalem, and that's where Lazarus, Mary, and Martha lived. He says, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Okay. When was the last time you were given a dinner in your honor? Yeah. Some of you looking around and say, I don't know if I ever been. Yeah, birthday dinner. What do? They put you in a place of honor, and people make sure that you get an order first. Right? And then when the bill comes, they make sure you don't see it. Their banquets looked a little bit different. Okay? They reclined at tables. In the Jewish culture, they would lay with their feet out, and they would prop themselves up, and they would have their heads close together, and they would eat whatever was put down. And the person who was in the place of honor had a special spot, and everybody knew that this was to honor him. It was a big deal to have a feast to begin with. But to have one given in honor of you was also a big deal. And Jesus accepted the invitation. Now, this is important. Okay? They were giving a feast to honor Jesus, and he accepted the invitation. He didn't say, oh no, don't go to any trouble. Okay? He allowed them to honor him. Well, this is where he raised Lazarus from the dead, right? And they were going to honor him. And he came to the feast. Okay. It says here, Martha was serving. We knew that was going to happen. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. We've talked about nard before. It comes from a little flower. It's very expensive. We talked about the alabaster jar, the fact that you're talking about a jar that's just carved out of stone without power tools. Okay? This is a very expensive thing. Matter of fact, we're going to have somebody say estimate that this is worth a whole year's wages. Now, I can tell you how much that would be for them. But just think about your wages. Okay? What you make a year, and just stick that on the jar of perfume. Okay? This is a pretty expensive gift. And this isn't one of those things where you give it and you squirt a little bit on every day. You know, the gift that just keeps giving. No, this whole thing was shot in one time. Matter of fact, another text says she broke the jar. The jar was even, you know, remember the old collector's jars? Remember the old collector cologne things? Do you guys remember those? Yeah, you remember those? The ones that look like little cars, or you can still buy them at garage sales. You don't remember those?
Avon,
the collector's thing, you know? After that awful smelling, after she was gone, you still had the jar. You still had the cool looking little thing, you know, it looked like a fire truck or something. It broke the jar. Broke the jar. Put it on his feet. His feet. Wiped his feet with her hair. Do you think anybody felt embarrassed about this whole thing? Maybe there's a little awkwardness going on. All right? One thing it does tell you, I told you that Lazarus and Mary and Martha had money, right? Remember I told you that? Here's one way that we know. I mean, they had a jar of perfumes worth what you made in a year. They had expensive taste. And Mary shot it off. At one time. Did she do it to embarrass Jesus? Did she do it to manipulate Jesus? No, she did it to honor Jesus. It says here, one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who would later, Judas, by the way, Judas came from Iscariot, all right, which was near Jerusalem. That's where Iscariot comes from. It wasn't his last name, Judas Iscariot, okay, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. There's one. There's always one. But here's one in the middle of this amazing thing going on, say, I got a problem with that. Here's a problem. Something could have been done better. Something could have been done different. Something is wrong with this. This is not right. This is not right. There's a problem. It's a problem. It's a problem. It's a problem. It's a problem. I found a problem. Now, I'm sure he waited till after dinner to say this. No, he didn't, because he's rebuked right there. Jesus says, it says here, that leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was meant that she should save this day perfume for the day of my burial. Yeah. He says, you will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. Right then, while she was doing it, Judas steps in and said, let me ruin this whole thing. Because you know what? I got a better idea. I've got a better idea about this use of money. I mean, we could have sold this thing. Think about all the money, all the things we could have done for the poor. This is just wrong. Would that have put the perfume back in the jar? Would that have put the jar back together? Would that have stopped the place smelling so good? Do you see what I'm saying? What he said and what he did wouldn't do anybody any good at all. Except that he was saying, oh Lord, Jesus, you really messed this one up. Now, we had someone come and confess Jesus is Lord today. We've all made that confession, those of us who've taken on Jesus. Do you have a problem with telling the Lord what to do?